Hello, Facebook world. Beth here from Access Paranormal, here for I Wanna Know. And this week's topic is, should I research the history of a location before investigating? Now, this is a really interesting topic because it kind of semi came up probably about last week's topic. Kind of brushed on it a little bit, and I've had some really interesting responses. And I know that as investigators, a lot of us research the history of a location before we investigate. But before I go into that, I wanted to mention that Sarah from Paranormal X-Files has a really cool blog called Living Life in Full Spectrum. How good is that title? And she's actually written about this particular topic as well. And so go and have a look. She's actually got a bit of a write-up on that and her thoughts on that too. So have a look. She's also on Facebook as well as her website too. So hello, Karen. How are you, sweetheart? Hey, Mark's joined. Jeff's joined. Good to see you guys. So should you research the history of a location before you investigate? This is really interesting. For myself, I say yes and no. And I know it sounds a bit fence-sitting type stuff, but I think it depends on the circumstances, and it depends on the reasons why you're actually there at a particular location. So I'll go into it a bit more. But firstly, I'll explain a little bit as to reasons why investigators do actually, hi Ed, how are you, sweetheart? Reasons why investigators actually do look at investigating a location for the history of a side of it before actually going and investigating. And as most of us will know, it's due to the fact that if someone was to pass away in a place and they have a lot of strong emotion, and it could be happy and sad, it doesn't actually necessarily have to be negative, that can still be there in a particular place. So knowing the history of a location can possibly give clues as to maybe what might be happening from a paranormal perspective. So let's go. Hi Shane, how are you? So yeah, so that's the general reason why investigators do look at the history side before they actually do investigate. And with that being the case, I think for myself, there is a lot that can actually hinder an investigation by doing so. Reason being, and hear me out, knowing the history of a location before you investigate can actually kind of influence your decisions on what you're investigating. So say, for example, a lady had fallen over on the steps of a particular house and had passed away, and she banged her head twice on the ground. And you are there with other investigators, and you hear, you say, so Mary, her name was Mary, hypothetically, everyone's name's Mary. Are you out there? Are you, can you hear us? Can you see us? What's going on? We'd love to contact you, come closer. And you hear, and you're like, she died from 2 knocks to the head. This is totally her. I have been there. I have done that myself. And that's when it becomes dangerous to a point, because we start to, as investigators, look at the history to explain it straight away. And that's when it can start to hinder. We're not actually looking at why the phenomena is happening. We're actually looking at the history side and explaining it that way. So from that point of view, it can actually, for myself as an investigator, can really hinder our investigators. Oh, Paratech oh yes, Oz Paratech, great paranormal equipment, and is fantastic. Aussie company, great range of paranormal equipment. So Anne is a part of Oz Paratech, so go and check them out as well. And there you go, Anne. And Sarah's joined as well. Hey, Ariana. Yes, definitely as well. And Vicky, happy. Hopefully you're still in Australia while you're watching this too, sweetheart. I know you're having a great time in Perth and Fremantle. So yeah, so that's the thing. I can see it can actually hinder it. So, because we're human, we're going to want to start to go and go for the historical explanation, because we know the history of it, and that can actually almost damage it a little bit. So be very, very careful if that is the case at all. Where it starts to become tricky is when it's a public location. So the internet's a beautiful thing, but there is so much information out there. And as investigators, we're really passionate often about what we do, and about other haunted locations. We're going to know the history of a place beforehand. So what happens then? You already know the history of a place. And that kind of happened with me with Waverly Hills, which is really interesting, because knowing the history of it and knowing it really well and then going to investigate it, I was constantly fighting with the whole like, oh, it's the lady that looks after the particular floor we're on. Okay, and then when I'm feeling a little bit different and like, oh, maybe it's her trying to, no, okay, whoa, lady, chill. We've got to be logical about this. Just because you know the history of the place and the stories and the information that other people have passed on, then doesn't necessarily mean that is the reason why you're feeling that way. So I too have recently even gone down that path myself. So be very careful. As I said, public locations, we've got different intentions as investigators going there anyway. We're not there to find answers for somebody. We're there to learn, to experience, to try things out, to grow. And so it's a very, very different environment. So that's probably where it's a little bit grey, and it's a bit hard not to know the history of a particular place, particularly if it's well known. Private cases, though, it's a different ball game. There's a whole level of seriousness, as you know. Oh, hi, Jason. Hi, Maggie. How are you, sweetheart? And Michelle as well. Yeah, no, it's a different ball game altogether. That's when it's a whole level of seriousness. And with that being the case, if my first tip would be to be able to make sure that a team wouldn't get influenced by the history of a location is to actually have only one person in the team research and not tell anybody anything. That's the best way to do it. That way it's controlled. That way you have your resource there. But hopefully if you are looking at private cases and you are taking on an investigation, it's not just one investigation. It's something that will happen over time. So in that particular instance, I think it's best not to know the history of a location. It's easier to control that information being filtered out. As investigators, we look at debunking phenomena as opposed to actually going to something historical straight away. So the phenomena needs to be looked at first. The people, the situation, the environment, the psychology needs to be looked at first before even something remotely from a historical perspective should be explored. So I think all avenues should be, but there's a level of when to look at it. And I think a great way to control that is only having one person who's got that information. I also suggested that person doesn't actually attend definitely not the first investigation, if not the second, because it can be really easy to give those kinds of clues out because we're human. That's how we roll. And if someone comes in and says, "Oh, I'm hearing tapping and rapping on the floor," and it's really strange, and there could be something from a historical perspective that could actually help explain that later on, but you don't want that to kind of influence your investigation. And I know that Karina up in Townsville had commented on this particular post earlier today, and she made a great point of the same thing. You've got to be very, very careful about not letting it influence your investigation as well. Yeah, one person. Yeah, exactly. So Jacqueline, very true. Absolutely. Says good. Only one person knows, and they keep it to themselves. That's better. So I still think it's good to know the history of a location, but and researching it before an investigation, but not something the team should be allowed to know a lot about, if at all anything, because then they are focused at the task at hand. Now, I must admit that I have found with this particular way that doing I call them audio recording sessions, but EVP sessions are a little challenging to say the least, when you rely so much on the history of a place to ask the questions. So you want to build a rapport, if there's anything there, to be able to draw it out and see if it wants to communicate. But if you don't know any history, it feels really intimidating. So that is when you've had to become really creative with the kinds of questions that you ask. And I found that's been really, really helpful as well. I've had to really kind of go, well, I can't go standard here. I can't ask, when did you die? What's your name? Did you like it here? Do you want your home back? All this sort of stuff. I have to go with a completely different line of questioning, and it's completely off the ball. And that's made me really think about the kinds of questions to ask, as opposed to just relying on, the history of a location. So a few things there. Definitely recommend, if you are going to do it, have somebody know the history, but only have one person, and that they don't infiltrate with the team with the information that they know. Over time, I think if the team were to approach the historian or the researcher with questions, that's the only way the information should be ascertained. It shouldn't be something where the historian or the researcher is to tell the team what's going on. It should be something that they should approach the actual team member. That's why it's more controlled. That's why it's less likely for people to go, oh, you know, it's blah, blah, and it's this and it's that. But hopefully the phenomena is actually being more investigated as opposed to actually just the historical side of it as well. Hey, Belinda. So yeah, it's definitely something where you need to really look at the whole thing of it. Have somebody there, have somebody who's got that information, and let the team go out and actually ask that person those kinds of questions. Let them go out and actually say, you know, what's going on, or look, can you verify this? Don't have the historian actually telling the team anything, because then that's less likely. It's a more controlled environment as well. Hey, Michelle, excellent. Awesome. Glad to hear, guys. So hopefully you got a few tips out of that. As I said, so generally it depends on the circumstances. It depends. Obviously, public locations are just going to be very, very difficult to hold from a whole historic, you know, perspective. But then again, our intentions are very different. Private locations and private cases and residential cases, well, then that's going to be something that's again, I think it can still be controlled a lot more easily, because there's a lot less information out on the internet about it, of course, but also have the historian keep that information and have the team approach the historian and researcher. So hopefully you guys got a bit out of tonight. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and again, send all your awesome questions in, and I look forward to talking to you guys next week. Nick and Michelle as well. Mwah. Thank you. See ya.